Alright, hello everyone and welcome to my tutorial on React Native and Redux. This tutorial has been a long way on the way. I'm so sorry for all of you who have subscribed to me early and has been waiting a long time for this tutorial. Maybe you're already Redux experts by now. I've been actually recording the whole course already on my laptop, but in the end I scrapped it after I did it because I thought the sound was too bad. Now I'm using an external microphone on my smartphone. That seems to give the best results. I've tried to use a headset and well, I had issues with my smartphone microphone, of course, and tried different locations. But now I'm gonna do the course finally. So let's get on to the contents and we'll look at what I'm going to show you. The contents of this little mini course is going to be, first I will talk about what is the problems that Redux is trying to solve. Why do we need it? What is it? What does it consist of? What is the components inside Redux? The basic data flow using Redux. Then we will jump into our tutorial, which is a simple counter. I will show you right here what I mean. So this is the final project that we will have in the end. This is a, a simple counter where you can increment and decrement and clear it and enter your own number. And this is all done using our own Redux actions and our own Redux reducers. So this is not using the component state inside vanilla React. And we will make another actions file, and we will also have another reducer. So we will be using multiple reducers, and we will import the actions and use them and our reducer and so on inside of our component. So, but we will go through this step by step and build it up gradually, so you will not be introduced to too many concepts at one time. So hopefully the pace I'm doing it in will make sense to you and gradually introduce you to the Redux concept. So let's get on to talking about what is Redux and why would you use it. Okay, so why use Redux at all? Why not just be content and happy that we have vanilla React data flow and just pass our state from a container state at the top level onto all of our components with our big apps? Well, at some point, the app you have or are developing on is gonna grow too big and too complex that it's not going to be manageable with the vanilla React data flow. At least that's been my experience. That's one of the reasons you might want to use Redux, is simply that the vanilla React data flow is going to be too complex with a large app. When you use the Redux the Redux framework, you're gonna also have a similar structure that other developers can look at and recognize and start working more sooner on it than if you had your own weird vanilla React data flow that's totally different from the way everyone else is doing it. But one thing to keep in mind is to not implement Redux before you have problems with the vanilla React data flow. Even the creator of Redux, Dan Abramov, is advising against using Redux until you have problems with vanilla React. So that's definitely something you should listen to if even the creator itself is advising against using it too early. Another thing is, of course, there's a lot of middleware you can use and take advantage of, saving, reloading the state. But I think for most people, the complexity issue is what they're gonna be attracted to from Redux. Now I talked enough about this. Let's go on to the next section where we are going to look at the overview of the components inside the Redux framework. Alright, I've made a simplified diagram of how the data flow inside the Redux framework is typically. Here you have your React component. This could be your React Native component, your container component, which you could typically call the components that are connected to your Redux store. Those are called container components. This is an actions, this is reducers, and this is store. This is part of the Redux framework, the store, reducers, actions. And the only way to change the state in the Redux framework is to dispatch an action. So let's say you have imported the action fetch users inside of your React component. Then you dispatch the action. You call the action fetch users when for example, the user presses the button. Bam, we call the action fetch users. Then we dispatch the action. It sends an action type and an action payload to the reducer. So in this case, it would probably be that the action type is fetch users or fetching users. And maybe the action payload is to, well, we don't actually need an action payload in this case. We can just have a case inside of a reducer. So this reducer takes in the fetching users action type, and then it changes the state to the new state. So in this case, the reducer would maybe change the activity indicator for loading screen to be true. So now when the user presses the fetching users, it will show an activity indicator to show that it's fetching from an API. So the reducer is taking care of changing the state accordingly and returning a new state to our Redux store. Our React component is subscribing to the store, so it will see the updated state and it will show then the activity indicator. Another example, for example, our counter app we're gonna make. Let's say we have a set counter action. When you input the number manually for the counter, then you dispatch call the action, you set the action type, set counter, and maybe your payload is 5 because that's the number you entered in. That was not the number 5. So then the reducer is gonna change our state accordingly. So it will set the state of the counter to 5, and it will turn the new state to the store. And our React component is gonna see the updated state, and it will show the number 5. Ta-da! So it's an extra layer of complexity compared to the vanilla React data flow. But trust me, when you have bigger, complex apps, it's gonna make it a lot easier and a lot more organized compared to using vanilla React data flow. But remember, don't use it until you start having problems with it. At least don't use it unless you really know you have a big app coming up. Okay, now we are finally going to go into the actual coding tutorial and make our first counter. Okay, see you. Okay, so now on to getting our Redux project, or actually just a starter project. I'm gonna put in a link to my repository here. Then I'm gonna copy this with the git clone command and paste it into my console. And then I'm going to go into the directory Redux Learning Starter. Then I'm going to run yarn install. If you don't have yarn, feel free to use npm install. Then I'm going to wait for this to install. And then we will run the React Native run iOS command. So this means you have to have Xcode installed and set up and so on. And vice versa, you can also use React Native run Android, of course. If you want to use Android, that's up to you. And now I'm just gonna wait for this to finish, and then we'll move on to the next section and look at the project. Okay, see you. All right, finally we are inside the project itself. It's just a basic counter where you can move the number up and decrement the number. You can also reset the number. Amazing. And you can enter a new number and so on. So as I said, nothing you're gonna write home to your mommy and dad about and show them. Maybe you will, but it's not something you're gonna put on your resume. But the point of this project is to very basically introduce you to the Redux concept. So for now, we are just using component state inside this project. I will try and increase the font size here. As you can see, we just have the state of count, and here is all my functions I'm binding. Here's the increment where we increase the count state by 1, decrement -1, on press clear, then we set it to 0. This is where we take in the number, the custom number. We parse it as int because it comes in as a text from the text field. Then we set the state to the count. And this is just the view of it. Here's the text input for the count setting. And yeah, there's the button for incrementing and the counter itself, and decrement and the clear. So very simple example, but it's gonna get a bit more complex once we put Redux onto it. And in this small example, it's not gonna make so much sense for you to implement Redux. But like I said before, when you have bigger apps, it's going to help you a lot because you will have it more organized. And at some point, you simply want to have a global state to call actions at any container you might have. So bear with me, in this example, it's not going to make a lot of sense to implement Redux here, but it's just to show you the basic steps of implementing Redux. Okay, I've talked enough about this, I think, and let's move on to the next section where we actually start to add the Redux package and start implementing some Redux. Okay, see you. Okay, so now on to adding the Redux packages. I will be using yarn add react Redux and Redux. So the Redux package is a platform independent package for Redux implementation, and the React Redux package is, well, specifically against the React library. Okay, so we add that. If you do not have yarn, you can also use npm install, like so. With save if you want to save it, and the package's name again. If you want to try out the yarn package, you can go to yarnpackage.com and install it. It's pretty easy to install. Anyway, that's it. That's all the packages we need to install to start using Redux. Now on to the next section, we actually start to implement our provider and our store. Okay, see you. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this section where we are going to hook up our store to our app using the provider. So instead of talking about what is a provider and so on, I'm just going to show you the actual code first. I think that's going to make it easier for you to understand it. So I'm gonna move this import app up here, and then I will import React because we're going to use a little JSX in here, like so. And I will just increase my font size a bit so it's clear. Then I'm going to import the provider from the React Redux package. Okay, so now it's time to use our provider. I will make a app container component which has the provider tags surrounding the app. Like so. And instead of using the app we had before here, I'm going to use the app container. So now we have our provider surrounding the app itself. You see a warning down here because our store is not provided to the provider tag as a prop, like so, because we have not made our store yet. We will do that in the next section. But to explain more about what is the provider's responsibility exactly, the provider's responsibility is to surround your whole app with this provider tag, and then it's going to provide the Redux store to your whole app. So anywhere in your app you can hook up to the Redux store or the Redux global state. That's pretty much what we're going to use it for right now. Okay, so don't try to write this store here. We're going to do that in the next section, because if you do that, you will get an error because we haven't made the store yet. But in the next section, we are going to do that. Okay, see you. Okay, in this section, we are going to create our store with a very simple reducer. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to make a simple reducer. I'm going to make a folder inside my source folder called reducers. Inside here, I will create a file. I will call it counterreducer.js. And inside here, we have a reducer, which is a function that takes in an initial state and an action. So it takes in the previous state or an initial state and an action. The 0 is in case there's not been a state initialized, it will just set it to 0 in the beginning. In our case, we have a very simple state, which is just a 0, but sometimes you can have more complex states, which is an object with lots of different properties. In our case, we just have it as a 0. Now, usually you would have a switch case in here on your action type. So, for example, if you get the case of increment, you would return a state with a +1. So you return a new state for every case you get. Now let's try the decrement case. So here we return state -1. So for every of the different states or the different action types you get, you return a new state. You do something with your state and return a new state inside the reducer. Now in case you get a action type you don't know what is, you will have the default case and you will just return the state. Okay, that's it for a very simple reducer. Now back to our index file, or in my case index iOS file. I will create my store now and pass it to the provider. So to do this, I will import create store. Remember the curly braces around here from the Redux package. And we are going to import our reducer from the reducers folder, and since we're in the root folder, we need to go into source and then into reducers and then counter reducer like so. Then we can just create our store, create store, and pass in our reducer. Now we can pass the store property to our provider tag and make it happy and stop making a warning, like so. Ta-da! Now we have the store hooked up to the provider. We have the provider surrounding our whole app. So now in the next section, we can start to connect our React component and start using the Redux global state. So see you in the next section. Okay, so now we created our reducer and we created our store. Now let's try and hook up our Redux store to the app, our React component. We go inside app.js and we import connect from React Redux. Then instead of having the export default up here, we will create our own export default in the bottom of the file, like so. We will write export default connect map state to props. In here we will put in our actions. For now we don't have any actions, so I just put null. And then our class name, in this case, is just app. That this could be any React component name you have, and so on, like watch component, so on. Whatever component you're connecting to the Redux store. So this is a kind of weird syntax. You call the connect first, and you call your component after inside the export default, but this is the way you connect your components to the Redux store. Now let's create the function for the map state to props. It takes in a state and it returns an object where you map the different well, you map the state to props. So for example, I would have my count here from state, like so. So you map different state properties up to your counter. So for example, if you have state people, you would do it like this. If you had a bigger state, or state.counter. Now in our case, our state is just a simple number, so it's just like this. Then we can see it running still. Now let's try. So now our Redux state is mapped to our props. So if I run console log this props inside my render function, and I start the debugger, I already have the debugger running. Then I go to my browser, my debugger, and I can see my count in here. And this is from the props property inside this. It's not from our state. So this is the Redux state, which has been mapped to our props. at least a part of the state, you would say. Usually you will have a very big state inside a Redux, and you wouldn't want the whole state inside every component. Likewise with your actions, you wouldn't want the component to access all your actions. Similar, your actions would come in here, but we don't have anything right now. So that means we can now use this .props.count. Okay, so it's still running because that's what we mapped down here. We mapped count to state and it came to our props. So now we are using this .props.count in here. And if we go and try to increase the counter, we can see our text field is increasing because that is still using the state, the component state for the counting, but our field in here, our text field here, is not being updated because this is just a Redux state, or this is our Redux state we have here, and that's not being incremented or decremented as we press the buttons. That's only the component state that's being incremented or decremented. But that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna hook up our actions such that when we press the buttons, we will call our action or dispatch our action, and the reducer will take the action and give us our new state. So see you in the next section. Okay, so now we have hooked up our Redux state inside here by using the props that we mapped to our mapped inside our map state to props function from the Redux state, and we mapped that onto count. So our props, this .props.count, is now the Redux state of the counter. Now we saw nothing happens when we press increment or decrement, only in the counter here, which uses the component state. Now let's try and do so that increment also increases the Redux state. So to do that, we need to create an action. An action is the only way to change the Redux state. So first I'm gonna make a folder called actions. And inside actions, I'm gonna make the file called counteractions.js. And inside here, I will export a function called counter increment. An arrow function like so. And this function just returns a action type. So we write it as type, and I will write increment. So increment is the action type. Okay. So now we also need to export or do an easy way to import these actions in our different components. So we create a index file, index.js. Inside here we write export star from counter actions. So this makes it so that you can use the folder and import any action you want from it, which we will do now inside the app.js file. Inside here, we will import the action. So we write curly braces counter increment from actions. So this makes that you can import lots of different actions from your different action files in an easier way. The index.js file via that. Okay, so now we imported the action. Now it's time to hook it up down in our connect. To do so, we can just insert a object here and write counter increment like so. Now we have hooked up the the Redux action inside our app or our component, sorry. And we can now call the action any way we want to. So let's, instead of running this on press increment, which is adding or changing the state inside our component state, we'll just use this props dot counter increment. So that's what's changing the Redux state. Now let's see, if we press plus here, you can see that it increases. But nothing happens on our text input up here because that is still using the component state. So if you press minus, you can see it's still changing because our decrement action is not hooked up to our actions inside Redux. So let's try and do the same with the decrement action. We go inside counter actions JS. We write export const counter decrement, an arrow function that returns an action type. Now let's let's import it. Counter decrement from actions and connect it inside here like so. Now we need to call it inside our wheel. So in here with this onPress decrement, we will call this props counter decrement like so. And we can see now we are only using the Redux store, the state inside the Redux store. We are only using the Redux actions, and this is purely the Redux state we're messing around with now. Okay, so let's try and see. So let me show you where it actually changes the state. As if you can remember, we made our counter reducer inside the reducers folder, where we have a switch case for the action type. And in case there's an increment, the state will be +1. In case of decrement, a state -1. So that's the action type we are making a switch on. It's just a string. And inside our counter actions file, we dispatch these action types. Here's increment, here's decrement, and our reducer handles the different action types. So that's how it works basically. And of course you can have multiple components that can call and import any of these actions as they please. Likewise with the different properties in your state, they can also map that to their props and use it and show it. So that's how it works in a nutshell. In the next section we will add the clear and the set action. Okay, see you next section. Okay, so now we will hook up 2 more actions to our component. We will also create the actions, of course, which is the clear action and the changing of the counter manually inside the text field here. So let's create the action first. We will create counter clear inside our counter actions file. It's going to return the type clear, and we save it like so. Then we will import it inside here from our actions. And now we will hook it up inside here. Counter clear down in our connect. Now we can start using the action. So instead of this on press clear, no, actually, yeah, I'm gonna put it here. So I call props counter clear, like so. Let's see if it's working. No, nothing's happening. So why is nothing happening? Well, nothing is happening because we haven't handled the action type inside our reducer. So let's go inside our counter reducer. Inside here we can see we have the case for increment, we have the case for decrement, but we don't have any case for clear. So let's make that case clear. In that case, we just want to return 0 and reset the state to 0. Now let's try again, see if it works. Yada! It works now. Okay, so now we are only using the Redux actions and state to do this. Pretty cool, huh? So what else do we have? We have the change text up here. I would like to do so that we change the state in the Redux state also via the text field. Let's try and do that. I will do the same thing again. Except for this time we will take in some kind of data from our view and send it next to our reducer. So in this case we have what we call an action payload. So let me show you how that works. I will make an action called counter set, and inside the arguments here I will put the number that we receive. I will call this received number just to be clear. And inside here we have the type, we call it set. Then we have the payload, which we can make as received number. So now let's see how that works inside our counter reducer. So inside our counter reducer we have a case for set, and in our case we now also have an action payload with us. So we just set the state or the counter number to be action.payload. And action.payload was what we defined inside our counter action. In here it is the received number that we get inside our action, and we set the payload to be that. And then again we set the whole state just to be the action payload. Now let me show you how this works inside our component. So we call inside the text field unchanged text is called every time we write a number, and it gets passed as an int because for some reason the text field makes, or the text input makes the number into a string. So, but instead of calling this .set state, we will call the action of setting. Let me just import the action first up here. Counter set, like so. And let's hook it up down in our connect here. Counter set, like so. Then let's try and call this .counter set from our props, and this time we can input our received number in here as the argument. So we can insert count here. Okay. Now let's try and see. Okay, nothing happened because we also set the, well, nothing's happening here because we also have this component state still in the value of the text input. So let's try and change it to props instead to use the Redux state. Okay. Now they're both changing. Now let's try and set a 0 here and change it to 90, and we see the Redux state is also changing to 90 because we are calling the counter set with our payload here. So now the whole app, or yeah, the whole component is using the Redux store and the Redux state. Now let me show you something else we can do. We can take all of this and delete it, because we're no longer using the component state. So let's see, still everything is still working. Just doing some manual testing here. Oh, this undefined is not evaluating this props counter set. That's because I still need to bind my unchanged text in here. Actually, yeah, let's just do it in the constructor here. So I'm just gonna make a constructor with unchanged text, which is binded to this. Because we're calling this inside the unchanged text and it's being used in here. Let's try again. I was doing so well and suddenly I screw up, huh? Okay. So why doesn't it let me? It's just my for number not working so well. Okay, so as you can see, my point I was trying to make is that the component is now getting a lot dumber, meaning that it's not handling all the state anymore inside itself via the component state. Now we moved all the responsibility of handling the state onto the Redux framework inside the reducer and dispatching via actions. So this has put a more organized framework inside your app, and it makes it easier to comprehend what is going on actually. When you start looking at big apps with lots of things going on, you can easily see the reducers and the actions and not having to look inside the different components. So that's it. Maybe we will try and add some more. Yeah, we're gonna try and add another reducer, because normally you would also have multiple reducers and multiple actions. I mean, you would have them in separate logical component, files. Like you would have a people actions or a people reducer for another set of functionality, which I will show you in the next section. One more thing I like to show before we start implementing other actions and another reducer is that you would usually have some kind of types file where you would have all these strings declared as constants, because we are using these strings two places, and something can go wrong when you do that. It's not a very good practice to do it. So what you would usually do is you would make a types file, declare them as constants in here, and import them in both your actions and reducers. Let me show you how that is done. We would have a types file. In here we would write export const set counter, like so. And I would write, for example, set counter. And we would try to import it here. Set counter from types. Then I would write it here instead. And then I would do the same thing inside my reducer. I would write import set counter from, since we need to go one level up, since the types file is in our actions, we need to go one level up, and then to actions, and then to types. Need to put some curly braces around also. Then we can use set counter. And let's see if it's still working. It is still working. Let's do the same thing with our other actions. So let's make one for clear counter. And one for increment counter. One for decrement counter. And that's it. Now let's try using these. Decrement. Oh, clear. Okay, so increment counter, decrement counter, clear counter. And we start using them here instead. Like so. Same thing inside our reducer. Decrement and clear, like so. And start using it here instead of our little factorized strings. Like so. And we can see everything is still working. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a concept I wanted to introduce to you now. I didn't start out introducing it because I think that might be too much for you at one time. In the next section, we will start to create another action file and another reducer, and we will start to try and have a little more complex state with another property in it. So see you in the next section. Okay, so now I think I should show you how to implement another reducer and have multiple reducers and another actions file. So first of all, we are going to implement the other reducer. And first we will make the file. I will call this hello reducer. And inside this reducer, we will try and have a initial state here. It is an object with different properties. So for example, here we have hello text. Just saying hello. And then we have the reducer as before that takes in a initial state and an action. And it's a function. Inside here we will have the switch case for an action type. And by default, we will just return the state. So very much like our counter reducer, we have an initial state. Here we just have the state as a single number instead. Now we are going to try and have it as an object with different properties. So for example, here we have the as initial state as an object here. And for example, you would have multiple properties in here like loading, true, or whatever another, as many properties as you would like to have and mess around with. You can have anything in here. That's usually how you would have the initial state mapped out inside your different reducers. But in our first case, we just made it simple and had a 0 in here. Okay. Now we need to import this reducer also, like our counter reducers, but before we can import it, we need to combine them together. And to do this, we will create a index.js file inside our reducers folder. Inside here, we will import combine reducers from Redux package. And then we are going to import our different reducers. So we import counter reducer from counter reducer. And we import hello reducer from hello reducer. Now we are going to export by default the combine reducers function. And inside this function, we insert our different reducers and map them to properties like so. So we would have counter would be mapped to the counter reducer, and hello I would map to the hello reducer like so. Now we need to start using these combined reducers inside of our index file, in my case iOS. And instead of just importing a single reducer, which in our case was the counter reducer, we will import all of the reducers. So we would do this like so, and I will just rename this to reducers also here. Now this works because we are having the index.js file, so when you import from the folder, it will look for the index.js file, which combines the reducers. So now we get an error because we are doing a bit different mapping inside here. Let's look at our app.js file. So before we just had it as state in here, but now we are using something called counter. So we can see it's working now again, and we are still mapping it to the count inside our properties. So let me show you. Inside our index.js file, we map this to counter, our counter reducer. And inside app, we again take the counter property from our whole Redux state and map it to the count. So now let's try and import the hello reducer also from our state.hello. I think that's what I called it. Let's check in index.js from the reducers. Yeah, I called it hello, mapped it to my hello reducer. And inside my map state to props, I've used hello to state.hello. So let's try and look at our props now, how this looks now that we imported two states. I already have my debugger running here, so I'm gonna go into Chrome and refresh here. And now we can see from the console log upside in render, we have here the count to be 0. And we have hello from the hello reducer. And you can see that it is a object with a property here, hello text. And we could also put in other properties. So for example, let's say loading, false. Let's try and look now inside our console log. And we can see now we have another property called false, or false in loading inside the hello that we mapped here. So let's try and use the hello text from our hello reducer. We go inside text and make a text field here, and we can just do this dot props, this dot props dot hello text. Okay. Like so. And it says hello here, which we defined inside of our hello reducer up here. Now you would probably use some kind of destructuring maybe to make this a little prettier. Now we have another reducer, and we have started using the other reducer. We haven't tried to make new actions. I think we should try and make a new action and try to do something where we modify maybe multiple properties inside of a reducer instead of just having the simple number that we have had inside of our counter reducer. So let me try and show you what I mean by this. Now let's try and let's make a action first. So I want to, let's try and modify reducer. So I will make a property instead of called press button here. Then I will make another text field here inside of app. And I will write did you press the button? And in here my prop will be the boolean of press the button. I'll make it toString. Now I'll get my pressed button property from my hello reducer. And it shows here, did you press the button? False. So let's make a button under here. Show me the magic. And on press we will have our action of this props dot hello action, I will call it, with my amazing creativity, and it will show warning this prop is marked as acquired, but it's It's undefined because we haven't made it yet. So we need to make a hello actions.js inside of our actions folder. Inside here, I will call this, what did I call the action? I called it hello action. Okay. Hello action. And it will return a type. I haven't defined my type yet, so I will do that inside types, types.js inside actions, export const pressed hello button. Like so. Then I will import the type in here. Press the hello button from types and use it in here instead of a string. Then we need to go into the index.js file inside our actions folder and export all of the functions from our hello actions. Then we need to go into our app.js file and get the hello action imported from actions, and we also need to put it in here. This is getting to be kind of long now, this line here. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So now the warning disappeared because we have the hello action imported and defined now. So, but nothing happens when I press show me the magic because nothing is defined inside of our hello reducer to handle the pressed hello button action type. We just have the default case in here inside of our hello reducer. So let's import the pressed hello button from, let's go up a folder, go into actions and go into types. Then let's go and take and handle this case. We will return. Now this becomes a little strange. We have to return an object with a ... state and press button to true. So this is using some ESX magic to give us the whole state object, except for this press button property. We want to change that to true. So it will take the whole object of this, all the properties, return them as they are, except for whatever we define in here. So let me show you. If we press the button here, it will go to true because we changed it to true here. Now if we also press enter hello text to you press the button like so, you press the button, wow, and this one becomes true. Now I could actually remove this now because this is basically our whole state. We only have hello text press button like so. But let's say that you only wanted press button to be changed and you didn't have this ... state. You only had this. Then the hello disappears because you just changed the state into only being this object with this property. And we would like to continue having the previous state of all the other properties as they were before. So that's why we have this in here, like so. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for watching. So thank you for following this whole tutorial. If you've been through it all, you are awesome, and now you know at least some very basic Redux functionality. We have been making our own actions, we have been making our own reducers, and we have implemented inside our React component. Now if you want to connect other components to your React state or React Redux store, you would use the same principle of using export default connect and importing your actions and using them and making your map state to props. You could do this in any component you want to. Usually you would have these bigger container components that connects to the Redux store. And yeah, that's it. So a thing we didn't get into in this tutorial is asynchronous calls via Redux, like API calls. For example, you could use something called Redux Saga or Redux Func to make API calls via Redux inside the actions of a Redux action. But that's something I will save for another tutorial. For now, I'm just going to see how you guys react to this tutorial I made here before I invest any more time in another tutorial. But asynchronous API calls with Redux is definitely next on my list of tutorials to do. So with that being said, I hope you got something out of this tutorial, and I'll see you next time, hopefully.